The chamber of the Galactic Council shimmered with the light of 1,000 stars projected above its domed ceiling, an illusion of infinite grandeur meant to remind every delegate of their place beneath the unity of the galaxy. For humanity, that reminder carried only bitter irony. The Earth delegation stood at the far end of the hall, smaller in number than most, their uniforms sharp but plain compared to the ornate robes and glowing sigils of other races. They had come here with hope. They would leave with something else entirely. The eldest of the HFY, a crystalline species whose bodies refracted the chamber's light like fractured prisms, spoke first. "The matter is decided." His voice reverberated, cold and brittle. "Humanity shall not receive a seat at this council. You are premature, unseasoned. The galaxy requires stability, not reckless ambition." Ripples of agreement echoed across the tiers. A TR-called delegate, a reptilian matriarch whose scales glistened with ceremonial oils, hissed loudly enough for translation nodes to capture. "They burn their own forests, poison their oceans, and war with themselves. Shall such children be trusted with the levers of galactic order?" Laughter followed, not all cruel but none kind. Some representatives exchanged looks of superiority, others of thinly veiled disdain. Humanity's achievements, FTL travel, orbital cities, advanced AI, were dismissed as dangerous toys in the hands of unworthy upstarts. The lead human envoy, Ambassador Hale, remained still. His face betrayed nothing, though the silence from his team weighed heavier with each mocking remark. He allowed them their chorus of arrogance, because in arrogance there is blindness. When the voices finally faded, Hale stepped forward to the central platform where the starlight converged. "You speak of stability," he began, his words measured, deliberate. "You speak of wisdom bought by centuries. And yet you do not see what stands before you." The delegates shifted, unused to such boldness. Hale's tone did not rise, but it carried with the quiet intensity of sharpened steel. "In 3 short centuries we have gone from sparks in the night sky to vessels crossing the void. In less than a lifetime we've walked on our moon, harnessed the atom, mapped the code of life itself. We are not children fumbling in the dark. We are survivors. You look at our scars and see savagery. We look at them and see lessons carved into our bones." Murmurs flickered through the chamber. Some bristled at the defiance. Others listened with wary attention. Hale pressed on. "You dismiss us because we are young. But youth does not mean weakness. It means hunger. It means drive. While your civilization settled into comfort, we learned to endure famine, plague, and war. We learned that survival is not granted by council decree, but seized by those who refuse to die." A silence began to creep in, broken only by the quiet hum of the translation systems. Hale paused, letting that silence stretch until the tension pulled tight. Then he delivered the words that would echo long after humanity departed. "You believe refusing us a seat keeps you safe. You believe it keeps us small. But understand this, we asked once. Only once. Deny us now, and you will not have the luxury of asking whether we belong when the time comes. Because when the darkness comes for you, and it will, you will remember today. You will remember the people you dismissed as children." Hale's eyes, sharp as cold fire, swept across the assembly. "And you will remember the warning we leave you with now. If you will not stand with us, then run." The words did not echo by chance. They were carried by the chamber's acoustics, amplified by the stillness of stunned silence. No one laughed. No one jeered. Some delegates recoiled as if struck. Others stared at the humans as though seeing them clearly for the first time. The council president, a vast, luminous being of living plasma, finally stirred. "Your arrogance is breathtaking," it said, voice rippling like a solar flare. "Take your leave. Humanity remains an observer only." Hale inclined his head, not in submission, but as one acknowledging a wager placed. Without another word, the humans turned and departed the chamber. Their footfalls against the polished floor seemed louder than they should have been, each one a declaration in its own right. Behind them, whispers rose. "They threaten the council itself. They are dangerous. They may be right." But the humans did not hear, or perhaps did not care. Their message had been delivered, and the seed of unease had been planted. For the Council, the matter was closed. For humanity, it had just begun. The first warnings did not come from the Council, nor from its grand fleets, but from the far-flung survey missions humanity had dispatched into the dark edges of mapped space. Out beyond the comfortable trade routes and safe hyperlanes, human explorers recorded what others had overlooked: systems gone silent, colonies abandoned without distress calls, and orbital wreckage drifting through voids stripped bare. The data returned to Earth was chilling. Stars surrounded by lifeless husks where once thriving civilizations had stood. Planets rendered down to dust and atmospheres siphoned into nothingness. It was not the quiet of nature, but the silence of something deliberate, something consuming. Analysts pieced the fragments together, and the pattern became undeniable. It was not a war in the traditional sense, it was a harvest. A tide of annihilation advancing from beyond the galactic rim. Human scientists called it the Void Tide. Others gave it more poetic names: the endless hunger, the silence that follows. But whatever the label, the truth was stark. The tide did not conquer, it devoured. No survivors, no messages, only systems stripped of every resource from biomass to mineral core. Earth's envoys carried these findings to the Council. They brought recordings, sensor data, and eyewitness accounts. They laid charts upon the great chamber floor showing the advancing front, a shadow pushing inward system by system. But the Council was unmoved. The XYRR dismissed the reports as fabrication meant to gain influence. The TR insisted humans had misread natural collapses of unstable stars. Others scoffed, calling it paranoia from a species haunted by its own history of conflict. Always the dramatist, sneered a counselor from the aquatic Syari. Humans see ghosts in the deep because they are still children afraid of the dark. The dismissal was nearly unanimous. To acknowledge the threat meant admitting their complacency, their centuries of static order. It was easier to laugh at humanity's alarm than to prepare for war. Yet Earth did not laugh. The warnings were too clear, the evidence too consistent. Humanity had not forgotten what it meant to face extinction. They had endured plagues, ice ages, and near annihilation by their own weapons. Fear was not new, it was an old companion, and it demanded action. In silence, humanity began to prepare. Fleets that had once been exploratory were recalled and refitted for combat. Shipyards orbited the Moon and Mars lit up with activity, producing hulls at a pace no other species dared attempt. Artificial intelligence coordinated logistics with ruthless efficiency, moving resources between colonies, stockpiling fuel, forging weapons of unprecedented scale. Earth's leaders knew they could not rely on treaties or the Council's protection. They broadcast a simple message across human space: the galaxy is in denial, but we will not be caught unready. The call was answered with a unity rare in human history. Nations set aside rivalries. Corporations surrendered assets. Colonists volunteered ships and raw materials. Beyond the inner systems, alliances were forged with those the Council had long ignored: fringe species, nomads, exiles, and mercenary bands who lived in the margins of galactic law. Where the Council saw outcasts, humanity saw partners who shared the same instinct for survival. As preparations accelerated, a tone of grim resolve spread among humanity. They did not speak of victory, for they knew the scale of the threat defied such optimism. They spoke only of survival, of building bastions strong enough to resist the first wave, of buying time in a war that might last generations. Back in the halls of the Council, debates dragged on over trade tariffs, migration quotas, and ceremonial honors, as though nothing loomed beyond the stars. To them, humanity's fevered construction was proof of immaturity, a spectacle of wasted effort. But whispers began to circulate among younger species and discontented delegates. Some had seen the data themselves, and though they feared to admit it openly, they began to wonder if the humans were not mad, but merely honest. Earth did not care who believed. They cared only that the tide was coming, and that when it arrived, humanity would not face it with empty hands. The old words spoken in rejection still lingered: if you will not stand with us, then run. Now those words became a creed, repeated in shipyards and training grounds, carved into the bulkheads of warships and whispered by colonists as they watched new fleets rise against the void. Humanity had sounded the warning. The Council had chosen arrogance. When the horizon darkened, only one truth would matter: who had prepared, and who had not. The first world to fall was Vera Prime, a border colony of the Council known for its vast oceans and glittering crystal reefs. One day, signals flowed freely across its comm relays. The next, silence. Patrols sent to investigate found nothing but a planet scraped raw, seas boiled away, cities ground into ash. There were no bodies. No voices. Only emptiness so absolute it felt unnatural. From there the silence spread. System after system winked out, faster than the Council could even confirm what was happening. The Council chambers, once filled with endless debate, descended into chaos. Some demanded immediate military response, others argued to retreat and fortify their core worlds, while a few still clung to denial, claiming natural disaster. The paralysis was fatal. Humanity did not wait. When the first Void Tide scouts breached into charted space, it was human fleets that met them. Not in speeches or deliberations, but in fire. Entire flotillas vanished into the dark and did not return, but in their place came the crackle of desperate transmissions, human captains detonating reactors to deny biomass, crews choosing to ram enemy leviathans rather than retreat. The galaxy had never witnessed war conducted like this. Council navies favored precision, honor, preservation of territory. Humanity fought with a ruthlessness born of centuries of desperation. Moons were hollowed out and laced with antimatter mines. Atmospheres were ignited to suffocate advancing swarms. Human fleets drew enemy forces into killing fields, sacrificing their own vessels to collapse wormhole exits and bursts of gravitational fire. To the Council, it was barbarism. To humanity, it was survival. At the Battle of Karith, a Council armada tried to engage the invaders with conventional tactics, their admirals obsessed with preserving formation and minimizing losses. Within hours, the tide tore through them, their ships drifting in clouds of broken hulls. It was only the sudden arrival of human destroyers, already scarred from earlier clashes, that slowed the slaughter. They rammed engines into the heart of the swarm, tore open cargo holds filled with volatile fuel, and lit the void with fire so bright it seared alien skies. The Council forces fled in disarray, but the humans held the line until there was nothing left to hold with. The news spread across the galaxy faster than the tide itself. Where the Council faltered, humanity endured. Where ancient civilizations clung to procedure, Earth adapted on instinct. Soldiers strapped into fragile suits to plant warheads by hand. Pilots flew suicide runs with steady voices, leaving behind messages not of despair but of defiance. Entire colonies voted to scuttle themselves rather than be harvested, their final transmissions filled with grim resolve, better ash than assimilation. For the first time, whispers of respect crept into council halls. Delegates who once sneered now spoke the word human with unease. They realized the newcomers had not exaggerated the threat, nor were they embellishing their resolve. Humanity had warned them, and now humanity was showing them what that warning meant. The cost, however, was staggering. Every victory was paid in fleets shattered beyond recognition, in names carved onto memorial walls that stretched for kilometers. Children grew up under skies filled with the glow of burning orbitals. Yet still, the humans pressed on. They did not expect to win quickly, perhaps not at all, but they would not yield. To the galaxy watching, it became undeniable. Humans were dangerous not because of their weapons or technology, but because of their refusal to surrender. They were a species willing to fight the void itself with bare hands if no other tool remained. Where others bent or broke, humanity dug in, teeth bared, and snarled into the dark. By the time the Council understood the scale of the invasion, the pattern was clear. The void tide advanced like wildfire, but wherever it struck human bastions, the advance slowed, stalled, sometimes even recoiled. Humanity was bleeding, burning, but they were holding, something no other civilization had managed. The tide had arrived. The Council trembled. Humanity, battered yet unbroken, stood defiant at the edge of annihilation, and for the first time, the galaxy realized that Earth's grim promise had not been a threat. It had been a truth. The war reached a point where attrition alone could not decide survival. Humanity understood this earlier than anyone. Every clash drained fleets, every victory cost as much as defeat. Against the tide's endless advance, ordinary strategies meant only a slower death. The Council still hesitated, paralyzed by tradition and fear, while Earth prepared something else entirely. Project Ragnarok had been whispered about in secret command bunkers long before the tide reached the core routes. It was not a weapon in the conventional sense but a plan, a gamble that balanced on the edge of catastrophe. Humanity proposed harnessing forces no sane civilization had ever attempted to wield: collapsing stars, chained singularities, vast stores of antimatter gathered in unstable rings. The Council called it madness when they first heard of it. But with their fleets in ruins and the tide pressing closer every cycle, even madness began to sound like salvation. Meetings in the Council chamber turned bitter and frantic. Some accused humans of plotting mutual destruction, warning that their recklessness could devastate entire sectors. Others argued that humanity's insanity was exactly what was needed, that only a species unafraid to stake everything could shift the balance. At last, the decision was forced not by votes, but by necessity. Council navies were broken, their worlds on the brink. Command shifted, not by decree but by silent admission: humanity would lead. The Dead Zone system was chosen as the battlefield. It was already a scar, its planets stripped bare and its sun destabilized by the swarm. Humanity saw opportunity where others saw loss. They ringed the system with automated mines, scattered fleets across asteroid belts, and filled dead orbits with bait transmissions. The tide surged in, drawn by the apparent weakness. What awaited them was not weakness but a trap calculated down to the heartbeat. The first phase was slaughter. Human warships threw themselves against the swarm, not to win but to bleed time. They detonated cores in the middle of enemy formations, ripped open fuel lines in kamikaze maneuvers, left trails of destruction that shaped the tide's advance into predictable funnels. Council observers recoiled at the cost: entire flotillas sacrificed, tens of thousands of lives given in minutes. Yet for every vessel lost, the swarm drifted closer to the waiting maw. Phase 2 began with the ignition of antimatter stockpiles hidden in the orbits of shattered moons. The explosions tore holes in the swarm, pushing it toward the destabilized star at the system's heart. Gravity wells, carefully manipulated, pulled the enemy inward, deeper into the collapsing furnace. Then came the final act. Human command activated the singularity engines, experimental devices never meant to be tested on such a scale. Artificial black holes opened, ravenous and unstable, drawing the swarm into spirals of destruction. For an instant, the void itself seemed to scream. The tide resisted, clawing outward, but the star gave way at last, collapsing into a roaring cascade that devoured everything caught in its grip. When the light faded, silence returned, not the consuming silence of the tide, but the stunned quiet of survival. Entire human fleets had been annihilated, their names erased in fire. But for the first time, the invincible swarm had been broken. Billions of its entities burned away, its momentum halted, its myth of inevitability shattered. The cost was unbearable, yet the victory undeniable. Council worlds that had trembled now looked toward Earth not with scorn, but with reverence and fear. They saw a people who had gambled their existence against annihilation and dared to win. They saw commanders willing to kill their own fleets if it meant buying one more hour of survival. They saw a species that had transformed desperation into a weapon no enemy could predict. From that day, no one doubted humanity's resolve. Where others sought preservation, Earth sought defiance. Where others hesitated, humans acted. The tide had faced the galaxy's youngest species and learned a truth that would spread through every surviving world. Humans were not merely participants in the struggle for survival. They were the edge of the blade. The council chamber no longer carried the laughter that had once greeted Earth's first petition. Its walls, once decorated in calm patterns of light, now glowed dim with the exhaustion of a galaxy in mourning. Delegates sat in silence, some wearing the hollow look of survivors who had seen entire homeworlds burned away. The old arrogance had drained from the air, replaced by a heavy acknowledgement. Their survival had been purchased by human hands. Into that chamber stepped humanity's envoys. They did not arrive as supplicants this time, nor as outcasts seeking approval. They came as the representatives of the one species that had faced the endless swarm head-on and returned alive. The doors closed behind them with a finality that left no question. This would not be a negotiation. Ambassador Hale, older now and marked by the weight of too many funerals, took his place at the center. His voice carried the same calm gravity it had years earlier, but now every delegate understood it differently. "You denied us once," he said. "You called us reckless, unstable, unfit to sit among you. You told us we were too young to shape the fate of the stars. And yet, when the tide came, it was our fleets that held. Our people who bled. Our worlds that burned in order to buy you time to breathe." The chamber remained quiet, save for the occasional flicker of translation systems echoing his words in 100 alien tongues. No one dared interrupt. "We warned you. We told you to run if you would not stand. You chose arrogance instead, and you watched as your navies shattered, as your colonies fell silent. You saw the abyss, and when it stared into you, it was humanity that stood between you and the dark." A representative of the crystalline HFY began to rise, perhaps to object, but Hale's gaze froze him in place. "We do not come to ask again," Hale continued. "We do not come to seek permission from those who could not even protect themselves. We come to claim what has already been earned. A seat at this council is not a gift to be bestowed at your leisure. It is the recognition of what is already fact. Humanity is no longer an outsider. Humanity is the wall that kept you alive." He motioned toward the rear of the chamber. A second envoy dragged forward a chair of heavy alloy, forged from the hull of a battleship lost at the dead zone. With a resounding echo, it was placed at the circular table, a gesture both symbolic and absolute. Humanity would not wait for a vote. Delegates shifted uneasily, some with fear, others with reluctant admiration. They had seen the broadcasts of human soldiers fighting to the last breath, colonies scuttling themselves to deny the tide, admirals detonating entire fleets to spring traps. They had witnessed not madness, but resolve stronger than survival instinct itself. Against such will, argument seemed meaningless. Hale's final words cut through the chamber like a blade. "You have seen what we are. You have seen that we do not fight for pride, nor for conquest, but because existence itself must be defended. If you stand with us, then you will live. If you refuse, if you hide behind walls of procedure and fear, then the warning we gave you still holds: run." Silence followed, heavy and absolute. One by one, delegates lowered their heads, not in submission but in recognition. The council had not granted humanity a seat. Humanity had taken it, carved it from fire and sacrifice, and no power in the chamber could deny it. The galaxy would never look at Earth the same way again. No longer the children, dismissed for their volatility, humans were now the unyielding standard by which defiance was measured. Their scars were proof, their dead the foundation of survival, their presence a reminder that even in the face of endless hunger, there existed one species that would not yield. And so the council continued, forever changed, with humanity seated not at its edge but at its heart. The young race had claimed its place among the stars, not with words, but with the simple, terrifying truth of their existence. They were different. They were indispensable. And above all, they were human.